All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining in this. We're going to be doing basically a quick kind of market update, and as well as giving you, the home buyers, some tips that are going to be very, very, very specific to make sure to get you in the right direction. We didn't want to title it this way, but I guess we can say, what are you doing wrong? It seems very bold, and this is on purpose because that is to signal an alarm. Oh my goodness, what am I doing wrong? And to keep it light, you're not doing anything specifically wrong at your fault. There's a lot of stuff that is just, sadly, finance and personal finance is not something that is taught very well, whether in school or with families or with each other. So we want to make it normal to talk about finance. And we're going to give you some key tips here, because myself, as a real estate agent, and Modo, who's co-hosting this with me, is a mortgage broker, is going to give you a deep dive exactly what you need to be successful in your journey. Okay, so let me just fix this up.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Feel free to include in the chat below any questions you may have, and we can potentially unmute you at the end of the session as well if you have more detailed questions. And thanks again for joining, everyone.
One thing I wanted to just do. Perfect. Yeah, everybody is muted already. Perfect. Yeah. Any questions you have, put it in the chat. We will go through it. Let's dive right in. Okay. We're gonna do a quick little speaker intro, introduce ourselves. Where do you start? Where do you start on this? Right? With house prices, a little over $1 million. Where does somebody start? We're gonna go through that. We're gonna give you some tips directly so you can get started literally today. And then we're going to dive. We always try to end it off with a market review, like where we're at with the snapshot of the economy, where the housing market kind of looks like, just to make sure that all of the misinformation that is out there is kind of brought back to you today. And then we're going to end it off with a Q&A. And by all means, any questions you have in the chat, you can share it with everybody, and you can share it anonymously. If it's something more personal, more specific to you, you can. And then, of course, we're going to leave you here with our contact info so you can reach out directly for your specific case scenario. Okay. We're on all essentially social medias. We're more active on Instagram and TikTok. And this presentation will be uploaded on YouTube entirely. It's already being recorded. So let's get started. Because I kind of jumped the gun here. Accompanying me, let's introduce him here, Mahmoud, call him Modo, just so our names don't get confused. Modo has been, how long have you been, like 3-4 years now in mortgages?
Yeah, this is the 4th year so far in mortgages with Dominion Lending Centers. So anything mortgage related, hopefully I'm your guy.
Yeah, and Modo's excellent. He works with A lenders. I think a lot of people have the misconception that a mortgage broker only works with B lenders or private lenders. That's not the case. He works with majority of the A lenders out there, and will be able to shop around your mortgage for you. As a real estate agent myself, who shop around for the houses for you, they're actually a very critical step where they're shopping around the mortgage for you, getting you pre-approved and all that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But for now, we want to dive right into the actual meat and potatoes here. Kind of touched on this a little bit here. Is there's something called privacy disclaimer here, and the reason why I want to do this in all the presentations we have is it becomes very sensitive, especially in our community, where people don't want to talk about finance. They don't want to bring up where their income is sitting, where their savings are sitting. All of these aspects are not really shared amongst each other, and we're not talking about the actual details of the numbers, but where the money is being put, where the allocation is not even had. And the issue with that is we're seeing people because they're nervous about their information is going to be shared or all that. We want to be very clear, very, very clear. Modo and myself, if you talk to us about your finances, it stays between us. It is not something that's going to be shared on WhatsApp groups or with our families or anything like that. It's a very important part to make sure that you're a little bit more comfortable when you are reaching out to us regarding your personal finance, because I know it is very sensitive information.
Yeah, and there's a story that I like to tell every time. Is Mohamed here, Mo, helped us with our own rentals. He helped us with our own owner-occupied or prime residence home that we bought. And after he helped us, we moved in. He helped us move in as well. I met with his brother, and we were talking, and I mentioned that the move and everything like that. I assumed he knew from Mo, his own brother, and he was like, "When did you move?" I didn't know. They're living under the same roof, and he still didn't know, even though I was okay with his brother knowing, but still, he was able to keep that privacy. So I would say rest assured that whatever you share is always private, and it's kept confidential.
Excellent. So let's jump right into it now. We'll start off with some key stats here. The average Canadian has $4,200 in credit card debt. This is not total debts. This is just credit card debts. If there's one thing we know about credit cards, is they charge you 19%, close to 20%. Total debts the average Canadian has is 21,000. So that's the 4,200 from credit cards, plus car loans, plus any student loans, lines of credit, so on and so forth. This does not include the house mortgage. This is just the smaller debts that aren't really very small. So why we want to bring this up, why we want to start the presentation with this, is a lot of times people are complaining about external factors, things that are outside of their realm. Things like, I want to start making more money, or I want housing prices to come down. These are all things that are out of your control. Why I want to start off with this is I want to bring you back to control. This here is something you have control of. How much debt you're in is in your control, it's within your hands. And if you're ever carrying a $4,200 credit card debt, then you have to ask yourself, if you're not paying it off this month, then put that debt in maybe a line of credit with less than half the amount of interest you're paying into it. Just allocating where your debts are is at least in some way a step forward. Ideally, get it to zero. So we're going to dive in some strategies to help you. Okay, so let's jump in. Where do I start? Modo, do you want to take over this?
Yeah, of course.
I want to be math is going to be dry today.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, one important thing to consider is always credit, not just in the mortgage and real estate world, but everything else in your life that concerns credit, such as car loans, student loans, lines of credit. It's very important to set yourself up beforehand with two major credit agencies. There are only two credit agencies in Canada that monitor credit. They are Equifax and TransUnion. Now, you don't have to subscribe to the paid versions of these agencies. What you can do is subscribe to the free versions, which are fairly accurate. So for Equifax, you have software like Borrowell, which is free. It's very friendly, user-friendly. And for TransUnion, there's also Credit Karma, which is also very common and user-friendly. So if you just use these two, and we're going to share them at the end, they're more than enough for you to be able to monitor your credit on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever you're comfortable with. And that way you're able to monitor what's happening, especially with things like fraud, and there are a lot of things that people uncover usually when they review their credit that unfortunately they uncover at the last minute or the wrong minute when it comes to their credit. So I would say set yourself up with these credit agencies. That would be the first step. And the next step would be to understand how your credit is built up. So usually we have 5 factors for credit scoring. The biggest factor, of course, is payment history. So basically, missing your payments will affect your credit the most. So make sure that is taken care of. The second thing, which is why we have it circled there, 30%, is amounts owed, or in other words, your credit utilization. Now, what that means is, so let's say you have a $10,000 credit limit. You want to make sure that you don't exceed 30% of that limit, which is 3,000. So if you exceed that limit, especially if you exceed 50%, which is 5,000, you will see that your credit will start to come down dramatically. We have people that have reduced their credit scores by more than 100 points just because of this particular aspect here. So you could be making all your payments, everything else is okay, but just because of these high balances, you will find that your score is starting to come down. Now we have other aspects as well, such as the length of your credit history. So how long has your credit accounts been open? So the more you have them open, the more they contribute to your credit score. So if you have a credit card that's been there for 10 years and you're not using it anymore, or for any reason you decide to remove it, it will affect your credit drastically. So one thing to do is to just make sure that it's paid off and open instead of closing it and having it affect you. And then the other two factors are new credit and the types of credit used. So new credit is basically credit inquiries. So if you have a lot of credit inquiries, that will affect your score. And the last thing is types of credit used. So the mix of credits that you are using. But I would say mostly if you have two credit cards and these credit cards are paid off and they're not exceeding uh, their utilization, then you should be okay.
Yeah, so good points there. One thing I want to touch base on is, you know how they say utilization or amounts owed is 30% affecting your credit score. So a good rule of thumb is keeping your utilization at 30% or less will affect your credit score by 30%. So you can always remember the 30%. And one part here I want to touch up on is this one here is the biggest part that when I ask somebody, hey, how does your credit look like? Oh, I have great credit. Okay, great. Which is it from Equifax or TransUnion or one of those other supporting apps? They say, oh no, I get my score from the bank app. So I think it's RBC and CIBC that's notorious for this, where the app itself gives you a credit score, and that for you it signals that, okay, I'm checking my credit score, and that's all. You stop there. You don't even consider signing up to these other credit bureaus to actually be able to pull your credit and review the entire report. We did this before. It gets pretty, you know, we don't want to dive into it and spend more time on this, but when you do pull up these reports, the dashboards have become so nice now that you can actually see how much you're utilizing, where all your credit accounts are. I myself have discovered that there was a ticket, because my name is common, Mohamed Ali, that somebody had a ticket under my name, which ended up going to collection. And I only found out through a TransUnion credit report. So I strongly advise that you go and review this, and ideally on a monthly basis. You want to be doing this on a monthly basis where you're opening up and just take a quick look. It takes like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and you can at least get an idea of how your credit health looks like.
Absolutely. And another thing to mention is I have a lot of clients that they have, for instance, Credit Karma. So they use Credit Karma religiously. They're very good about that. And the score there is good. They apply for any type of credit, for instance, a mortgage. When they do the credit check, the mortgage agent does the credit check. They find out, for instance, that the score is like 550 or 560, which is very low. And even though the Credit Karma show the score more than 700. Now, why that is because Credit Karma only shows TransUnion. We have the other factor, which is Equifax, which is actually more used by mortgage lenders. And they unfortunately didn't know that they could have checked other Equifax free sources. So if they did that beforehand, they would have noticed that the score was actually below 600 on that credit software. So it's very important to monitor both credit agencies, not just one.
Perfect. Right. So we're going to dive in. So we talked about credit. It is a main and starting point. This is something that is in your control. So we want to make sure you have that tool and you're going forward now with the knowledge of that. Second part that we see our clients and friends are making a mistake or they're doing something wrong is, well, let's start off with the positive. What they're doing right is they're saving money. Okay, I want to start off with the positive here. This is what they're doing right. They're saving money now. We're seeing accounts of sometimes 50,000, even sometimes $100,000 being saved, but it's put into a TFSA, or it's being put into a regular savings account. They're not, and they're first-time homebuyers, and they're not utilizing these programs. Money should be put into an RRSP and FHSA. So let's dive into what these programs look like. Okay. Feel free to jump in. So
so the two credit accounts here, or the two savings accounts that we have here for first-time buyers, are the FHSA, which is a new account. It's the first home savings account, which recently came into effect last year. So this is a good account in the sense that it combines the best of both worlds. So it combines the tax deductibility. So if you take any money out of it, there's no withholding tax when you withdraw it, similar to the RSP. And it also combines the tax-free investment growth that the TFSA have. So we have something that's a combination of the RSP and the TFSA, where you can put up to 40,000 into your account in total and use that towards your first home, while simultaneously benefiting from the tax deductibility that comes from that 40,000. Now you have a limit each year for it, which is 8,000 per year. So if you started this year, 8,000, next year, 16,000, and so forth. And the good thing about the FHSA, why I tell most first-time homebuyers to use this, is because there's no 90-day holding period. You can have a closing next week, put the money into your FHSA, pull it out before your closing, and use it towards your first home savings, towards your first home down payment, plus benefiting from any tax deductibility that comes during that year. So I'd always tell people, max out your FHSA and then start building on your RSPs. So with the RSPs, the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, for the home buyer plan, this has been there forever. However, there are some cool changes that just came out. So there's no withholding tax when you withdraw amount and use it towards your first home. The maximum used to be 35,000 per person. Now it's 60,000 per person, which is really good. This just came out last month. And you do need to repay it. For the FHSA, you don't need to repay it. For the RSP, you do need to repay it over a period of 15 years that starts 5 years after you make that withdrawal. So you have 20 years basically to pay it back, which is a very minute amount. It's not a large amount. If you consider that you only need to put back 1/15 of that amount every year, starting after 5 years. So it's very, very flexible. The only thing to keep in mind here is the 90-day holding period. So if you put your money today, it needs to stay there for at least 90 days, 3 months before you can use it towards your first home. And this is something that we are finding with clients, that because they only started to put money there, when they're making offers on homes, they're limited by the fact that the closing has to be 90 days out just for them to be able to benefit from the RSPs. So it's always best to start now and not before you're buying your first home immediately.
Yeah, so some excellent questions are coming down the pipe. So any questions you have, by the way, for people that have recently joined, put it in the chat box. We will answer all questions as we go or at the end. There's two things I want to bring up here. When you're putting these money in an FHSA or an RSP, it doesn't mean it's just sitting there waiting for you to potentially buy a home in the next year or two or whatever. It's not how these accounts work. These accounts can be registered. They're registered accounts, but they can also be tied into, for example, a stocks direct investing account. So for example, my RSP is actually investing with me. So I actually do buy stocks with it, or I do buy ETFs or whatever it is. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of what to buy with these things because, one, I'm not a financial advisor. We actually might even have a financial advisor on the call. Reach out to her. She'll be able to help you out. We can give you the contact number there. And she'll give you a lot of ways of how you can invest your FHSA, how you can invest your RSPs, and how to make sure that you are staying within the boundaries. One thing there, the FHSA is $8,000 per year for up to 5 years. That's how you get the 40,000. So don't go putting in, the bank won't even let you put in all 40,000 right away. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you have any questions, put it in the chat. We will go through them in more detail. So we want to cover this. This is an interesting slide here. So this one here is, what is the cost of not using your RSP and FHSA? On the middle column here, this one here is, if you were to just make $100,000, you don't contribute any money into your RSP or FHSA. And for the question that came up, but you put it in a TFSA. A TFSA does not help reduce your income. A TFSA is money that has already been taxed. So if that money increases in value and you decide to take it out, the TFSA allows you to take it without any additional taxes. If you put $100 in an RSP and it gains $50, so it becomes $150, that $50 increase that can be taxed whenever you pull it out. As soon as you pull money out of those accounts, it's going to be taxed. Why? Because this was money that was never taxed. So I hope that answers that question, but we'll go into more detail at the end, just so we can focus on it. So let's bring it back to this, okay? So without an, if you have $100,000 income, you don't contribute anything to RSP. You don't contribute anything to FHSA. Your taxable income is about 100,000, and the income tax bracket, just for simplicity of math, is 30%. Your estimated tax payable to the government is $30,000. Okay, that's both provincial and federal. But let's say you're going to buy a home, let's say in the next 90 days, 60 days. Let's say you're not even going to buy the home, but you put the money in an RSP. So you put all 60,000, right? You check your contribution limit on the CRA login website. You log into your CRA and you go check what is your contribution limit. If you don't know how to do that, once again, a financial advisor is really beneficial there, or your accountant. Your accountant will be able to log in and give you an idea what your contribution limit is. If you've been working for about 8-9 years, you probably already at this number or even higher. Depends on your income. But anyway, let's say you put all 60 in there. And then your FHSA, remember you said you can only put 8,000. So you put 8,000. The amount of taxable income for this year will be $32,000. It's not going to be 30% bracket. It's going to be closer to 20% bracket. But again, that's just for simplicity. Make it 30% bracket. Your taxable income is actually going to be, the amount you're going to pay in taxes is going to be $9,600. So you save about 20 grand in your pocket. Here's the kicker. Both of these, you're going to get a nice big tax refund, right? Because your employer would have kept about 30,000 for taxes, but then you're going to get about $20,000 in next year's tax return. So you'll say, oh, why is this beneficial for me? But when you're considering these home buyer programs, you're not necessarily thinking about buying a home in the next 30 days. This is the concern, is we do get phone calls. I literally just had a first-time home buyer wanting to buy a condo here in Bayview, and they were not able to take advantage of this program, so they actually had to delay making this purchase, and they lost out on the condo they liked. So we just went to go see condos, just to see, see if they're even interested. Love the place, ready to put an offer. And then when they heard about these programs and the potential savings, right, 20 grand, they said, okay, maybe we should hold off for 90 days. So that condo was gone. So this is the concern here, is the money should have in the first place been in these accounts. So we just started working with them, and this is why we want to make sure that this mistake doesn't happen with you as well, is you're prepared when the right time comes for you.
Yeah, it's a good point. You might ask, why didn't they use the FHSA first? Because there's no 90-day withholding period there. They actually did. They maxed out the 8,000 for themselves, 8,000 for their spouse, and they still wanted to benefit from more savings in their tax deductibility to put it towards their RSP. But the RSP has a 90-day withholding period, and in this specific scenario, they lost out on that specific home because they didn't have the flexibility of putting a closing date that works with the seller, because they needed that 90-day period to be able to benefit from these savings. And it makes sense. They are right. They would save a lot, and to lose out on 20,000 in savings doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So let's dive in. And of course, when you look at the market and you look at the prices, you look at where income is, where home prices are, of course, we are in a situation where you would say to yourself, how the heck spelled wrong? How the heck am I supposed to buy a house in this market? And we totally sympathize with that. We understand that it is a challenging time, especially if you're shopping around in the GTA. That it is not an easy step. It is not something that to come in and you put a $10,000 down payment and you buy the home, like how it was 15, 20 years ago. It is a totally different marketplace. And with the city becoming so popular, it has become tougher and tougher to buy a home. We sympathize with that. We want to give you guys tools so you can hopefully get in there and buy it. Some of the things we see how people are getting into this market is we got to realize that the city is a dual income city. So don't feel like there's something that you're doing wrong. We want to share with you and explain to you that a lot of our clients that are purchasing homes are not one person on the application. We see anywhere from 2 to sometimes 4 people to get into a home purchase. Now, whether or not that is the right way or not the right way, that we can go back and forth on for years. But there is potential in buying your first home, as long as it's not your dream home, starting off with something like a condo or a condo townhouse that is a lot more affordable. And we'll talk about the market data shortly, about how those categories are actually in the buyer market territory. Those we've seen a lot of inventory in the market, and we've seen the prices have stagnated or even come down quite a bit. So your dream home will not be your first home. For the folks that are coming from, let's say, a Sudanese background that are watching, over there you go, you build your home, you buy the land, and you build it the way you like, and it becomes, the heritage home for the family, and it's, generational. In Canada, it's not like that. It's very common to start off with a condo, you build some equity. If it doesn't even fit your family's, let's say, needs, if it's in a great area, you rent it, and then once it builds some equity, you upsize. Then it might be the townhouse or a semi-detached, and then you might upsize to that detached, and then that might be what you are looking for, and you stay there, and sometimes you even upsize from there. The second and the third point, as you can see there, is you are starting small. You are potentially renting it out if it doesn't match your needs, and then you're building that equity. The one conversation that we always have with our clients is, hey, I want to buy a home, first time in the country, or this is going to be my first home. I've been saving for X amount of years, and I have $50,000 ready to go, or I have $100,000 I'm ready to go, but I want a house. I said, okay, great. What kind of home are you looking for? And when we run the numbers, we say, okay, you probably can get a condo townhouse, right? It'll still be a 3-bedroom, still have a nice big basement. It'll still have, a lot of the ticky boxes, but it has the one thing that seems to be bugging a lot of people, which is condo fees or maintenance fees. So we actually created this slide here to really hone in on this stigma that we're seeing. Condo fees. Oh, no, I don't want to pay this guy $500, $600. I don't want to pay this company $500 or $600 a month. Sometimes we see $700 a month. No way. Why are we giving them this kind of money? Great question. Great question. Let's dive into the numbers. And we've used exactly true numbers of today, 2024. So you'll see a lot of condos will have maintenance fees of $400 to $700, even $800. So let's just pick a $600,000 2-bedroom condo with about $600 maintenance fees. Sorry, I guess I can point right over here. So right here, we're going to be looking at the condo, right? The condo does have some utilities are included, like water, heat, garbage disposal. These are common utilities that are included in a lot of condo fees. But hydro tends to be separate in a lot of condos. Some condos still have it included, but a lot of condos don't. So you might spend about $80, maybe even, let's say, $100 in hydro. We've seen it as low as 50. I've seen it as high as 100. Then you have repair and upkeep. So I want to explain what this is. Condo living is very relaxing. Condo living, typically all you have to focus on is a big upfront fee. Condo fees is $600. But you don't usually have to worry about the windows. You don't have to worry about the roof. You don't have to worry about a furnace. You don't have to worry about the boiler downstairs, the hot water tank. You're not worried about grass cutting, cleaning out the gutters. The snow removal, correct. All of these things you're not worried about. But that doesn't mean the condo doesn't have a garage outside or parking or visitor parking. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a little parquet outside. It doesn't mean the condo building doesn't have a roof to deal with, amenities, security, all of these things. So you still have all these aspects of things that you have to pay for, but you're paying it mostly in the condo fee. But for you as an owner, you're only paying for upkeep. Upkeeping a condo, and I can tell you this, is not very expensive on a month-to-month basis. You might spend $0, you might spend $200 a month. It depends. But usually it's not very high. So your total monthly upkeep cost, including hydro and maintenance fees and all that, is about $780, give or take. The one thing about maintenance fees while we're in the conversation is the larger the condo, the higher the maintenance fees, because the maintenance fee is per square foot basis. So just keep that in mind. If you're comparing it with a house, in this example, we used a semi-detached house, you are paying for the utilities. absolutely there's no condo fees, but you are paying for utilities, you are paying for hydro, and the upkeep of all the things we just mentioned can drive your monthly cost by $1,000. Now, we are in sales. You would think I would not be bringing you this kind of information and giving you another huge flag. My goodness, you're saying if I buy a house, on top of the down payment, on top of paying the monthly mortgage, on top of property taxes, there's another $1,000 I got to consider per month? Yes. Yes, absolutely. I would rather give you peace of mind that if you're going to consider buying a home, that here is what to expect. For a condo, you got to have about $700 or so on the side to cover things like maintenance fees and to cover upkeep and hydro. It didn't even get into property taxes.
Yeah,
but if you're talking about
people don't focus on this part here, it's because it's not fixed. Like condo fees are fixed. Like from the get-go, you know you're going to be paying this amount. So it's fresh in your mind while you're shopping for homes. But when you're shopping for freeholds, like a semi-detached or a detached or even a freehold townhouse, this is not something that's usual. It's not a number that you usually look at, the repair and upkeep of taking care of the home, that you wouldn't find in the condo itself. So things like, the furnace breaking down, taking care of the roof, taking care of the gutter, all these things that Mo just mentioned, they are going to be there, and you need to be take the initiative and factor those costs into your budget as well. Because they're not fixed, they're not on a regular basis, people assume they're just not there, but they are there, and it makes sense budget-wise to factor them in.
Absolutely. Now, the key thing here is about repair and upkeep is it depends. If you are cutting your own grass, you are shoveling your own snow, there are certain things you can reduce. And these aren't fees that are monthly and they're fixed prices like you mentioned. They do vary. You might find yourself spending a little bit more on certain things. If the AC breaks down, you might spend a large like $3,000 or $4,000 to repair, and then all of a sudden you're not spending anything for a while. So just keep that in mind that these, I agree with you, this is a variable cost, and I think a lot of people ignore it, and they see this as a fixed cost, and they freak out. I'll never want to buy a condo. I'm not spending $600. No way I'm giving it to some company, right? Condo living comes with a lot of perks, and I think that's being overlooked. So I just want to remove that stigma on the side, so we're a bit more open-minded with our home search process. One thing as well I want to just kind of bring out while we're talking about kind of condo fees is townhouses typically have a smaller number per square foot. For example, 80 cents per square foot is a typical condo maintenance fee breakdown. 80 cents per square foot, 800 square foot condo, that's going to be about $640 per month. But if you're looking at townhouses, you might see 30 or 40 cents per square foot. So if it's a 1,000 square foot townhouse, then you might see only $400 maintenance fee there. So you get a little bit more space, a little bit less condo fees. But if you're wondering what the catch is, typically a lot less amenities. So just keep that in mind when you are home shopping. We'll talk into it more if you have any questions. Just a quick reminder for everybody is if you are if you are watching and you have any questions, please put it in the chat. We will go through some of the questions that are being asked. One big aspect that we hear is the cost of waiting. We want to share with you guys a story that we go through, which is a lot of folks will say, okay, you know what, interest rates now are at about 5%. We want to wait until rates come down before we dive into the market. And we want to show you kind of like a little case scenario here, case study, about if you are purchasing a home that is, let's just say $750,000 at a 5% interest rate, what that looks like if you were to buy it today versus if you were to wait for interest rates to drop, and what that might look like for the home purchase. Because one thing that is common is as rates drop, typically we start seeing prices start to increase. We saw that with COVID, we saw that historically in different markets. So as the rates do start to come down, we will start seeing prices start to piggyback up. So just keep that in mind. So let's go through this scenario. Did you want to go through it yourself, Modo?
Yeah, sure. So this is a good scenario just to see if it makes sense to, wait or not. People are always asking this question: do I wait until rates come down and then purchase, or do I purchase now? So I think to put it in numbers makes it more visual for people to understand how to make that decision. So let's assume today we have a purchase price of $750,000. So that's the home price. Compare that to if you wait until rates come down, you wait for a while. But you have to keep in mind that if rates go down, it'll create more demand and it will drive prices up. So that same home, after a while, let's say after 1 year, will be worth 800,000, considering a 6% appreciation. So for the 750,000 home, the minimum down payment here would be 50,000. There is a CMHC fee, which is an insurance premium that you have to pay if you put less than 20% down payment. And let's assume today's rate of 5%, and this is your monthly payment, and the monthly payment is 42.55 in this scenario. If we go back to the 800,000 home that we waited until 1 year to purchase, after that 6% appreciation, the down payment here is a little bit more, another 5,000, because it's a minimum down payment required. The CMHC as well would be higher because the mortgage amount, if you look at the loan up there, the loan itself becomes higher. Instead of 728,000, you have a loan of 774,800. So in this scenario, we do have a lower rate because rates went down 4%, and the monthly payment right now is 40.89. So the rate saves you around 166 per month. Now, if you look down, you have the interest over 3 years, 105,000 for the first home. And then if you wait down the road, the interest rate, of course, is lower because it's closer to 90,000 because the rate itself is lower. If you look at the principal paid, 47,000 as opposed to 57,000. The important number here is the balance at the end of the term. I think this is what people should be looking at. Is we made a scenario is at the end of that 3 years, how much balance is left for me to pay off the home, because a lot of people are concerned about paying as much as possible for their home. So for the first scenario, it's 680,000, 624. In the second scenario, it's 717,000. So if you factor that in, all factors considered, you would actually be 30,000 ahead if you go with the first scenario of buying today, even with a higher rate, just because the increase in purchase price made a big effect here. And eventually you actually save 30,000 by pulling the trigger today. Now, we're not saying that this is every scenario, but for this specific scenario, it actually makes sense if you're looking at the whole picture to jump in the market now before purchase prices go up. And then even though the rate is lower, but you're having to deal with a higher mortgage balance.
Yeah, it really boils down to the parts that we circled here, which is the higher purchase price means you're getting more in higher loan amount, and yes, you are paying less in principal, but ultimately the balance in the term does is about $30,000 more. This is for a person that waited while the rates have come down. So I hope that part there is impactful. So what to do about this, right? Now that you have this, you know this, you understand how the credit part works. You understand, okay, now I can go review my credit. I can hopefully improve the credit. You figured out some ways of saving, so you're paying less in taxes, right? So again, we're focusing on internal factors. For the folks that joined in a little bit later, remember we feel a very helpless time right now. Cost of living has gone up. You can only make so much money. You can try to ask and get a promotion and all that, but at the end of the day, like how much you make is it's not as in your control as, for example, how much you can save. So you can choose how you to spend your money. You can only do so much with how much money you can make. So we want to focus on the things you can control, so you don't feel helpless. That's why we talked about credit, so you can take control back of your credit. Here's the free resources, Equifax and TransUnion, to take back control of your credit. The second one is the down payment. You do have to reach a certain down payment, which we didn't want to dive into the exact numbers, 5, 10, 20%. More so, how do you just save money? How do you save money in this environment? And how to save money, if we go back quickly, how to save money in this environment is taking advantage of these programs, FHSA and RSP. And there's a great question that came up about TFSA. We will talk about that. I want to share that. I'm going to spend some time on that because that is something that confuses a lot of people. But now by using these programs, you're paying less in taxes and you get to keep a little bit more of your money. So you're not focused on just making more money and then getting taxed all of it. You focus on keeping some of that money back, building up that savings. Okay. And then Ideally, we'll work on a plan with each individual. So after this, reach out to us specifically so we can actually work with you in specific market, specific case-by-case basis. The people you should be talking to are mortgage broker. For example, here we have Modo. Reach out to him, ask him questions. The one key thing about reaching out to these three people, a mortgage broker, a real estate agent, and a financial advisor, is it's not when you're ready to make a purchase. You shouldn't reach out to your financial advisor when you're ready to make a purchase of a home or buying a car. You should be talking to them on a regular basis so you can stay ahead of your finances. Talk to the mortgage broker as early as 2 years. If you're considering to buy a home in the next 2 years, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, FYI, Modo, I'm not going to buy a home probably for this year, maybe even next year. He's not going to say, okay, well, call me then, right? He's not going to say that and hang up the phone. What he's going to say is, okay, great, I'm really glad you reached out to me now. Then when you reach out to me, when you want to start looking at homes and you're 30 days away from buying a home and you need to move out and the landlord is saying he needs the place back and you have the savings and you want to go in and try to buy a home, but you haven't taken advantage of the RSPs, you haven't taken advantage of any of these things. So now you're freaking out, right? It's way better hearing I want to buy a home in 2 years than hey, I want to buy a home in 30 days, but I'm not ready. Or am I ready? You know?
Yeah, I would even say that the ideal client for any mortgage broker or real estate agent is the client that comes beforehand. Like I had a call last week, someone that called me and they told me, I'm not thinking of buying a home now or in the next 3 months. I'm actually thinking of buying the home by the end of next year, so another 18 months. So I actually said, kudos to you. Let's talk about it. And we actually had a 1-hour phone call just making sure that they had the right strategy in terms of their down payment, their income level, their credit, and there was a lot of things that they needed to consider. But the good thing here is they were very realistic. They knew that they had to put a few things in place before being ready. And this is the ideal client, the client that thinks beforehand. And by the time, I'm pretty sure that by the time the 18 months come, it's going to be a very smooth transaction, a very smooth process because they did the work up front.
Okay, so we're not done. Obviously, there's quite a bit we're still going to go through, but we want to leave you with some key things here. What is your homework for today? Your homework for today is to, if you're not doing this already, is sign up for one of these, Equifax or TransUnion. They're free. They themselves are free, and they also have other companies that use their platform, which is like Borrowwell or Credit Karma. We don't care. Use whichever of those 4 you want, and start tracking your credit monthly. We're not finished, but we just want to kind of take a little break here to talk about your homework. Second thing is, that we advise, is sign up for our monthly newsletters. We have your emails here. We're going to put you on the newsletter. It's just 1 email a month. Talks about what's happening in the market. It's going to talk to you about some updates and home tips and some financial tips for you. We each have just 1 newsletter we send out. And we advise you, if you care more about what's happening in the nitty-gritty day-to-day kind of basis, is follow us on these platforms, Modo Mortgages or Mo Realty Team, and we can give you a bit more detail, and you can kind of connect that way as well, or you can obviously just do it through phone. But what is your homework for the week? We're not going to stop there. You also have homework for the week. The reason why we didn't say it for today is because it's a Saturday, and some banks are going to be closed. But everybody on this call, if you're going to buy today, in 2 years, even in 5 years, open up your FHSA. If you don't open it, what happens is you might not be able to contribute for this year. So open up literally go to your bank. If you're with TD or whoever, you just go to your bank, you say to your the person across the counter there and say, I want to open up an FHSA account, and they'll walk you through the steps. Same money you have in your regular savings account or the money you have in your checking account, right? You should not have more than like a month to 2 months of spending on a checking account. Please, guys. You're not flexing here, putting $50,000, in a checking account. This is not a good idea, right? Put those money in these accounts. Better than that. You'll get the tax benefit today. If you need the money, you can always take it. You just get taxed on it. You would have been taxed anyway. That's all. The second thing you can open up is, or check that your RSP and top up that contribution limit. So you're going to go into your CRA website or talk to your accountant, see what your contribution limit is. For most people that have been working for about 8-9 years, you should be already at the $60,000 mark. But talk to your financial advisor. I don't want to be speaking on your behalf. Talk to them and see what contribution limit is. So that's your homework for the week, right?
I see Modo raised her hand. Feel free to include it, type it in the chat area. And at the end of the session, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can do that as well.
Perfect, yeah. So we're going to continue here. I'm going to talk about certain, well, Modo here will fill us in about an economy snapshot. So just before we dive into your questions, we have a bunch of great questions, by the way. Keep them coming, guys. I've never seen such detailed, excellent questions being asked today. Modo will give us a quick little snapshot about what's happening in the economy, and then we'll dive into your questions right after.
Yeah, of course. So we're going to talk a little bit about inflation because it does affect, the aspect of mortgage rates and qualifications and all of that. So far, the rate of inflation decreased to 2.7%. It is good news because it means what the Bank of Canada has been doing for the past years in terms of increasing interest rates has been affecting inflation. If anybody remembers, inflation at the top was actually 8.1%. So it is working. They brought it down to 2.7%, which is a huge achievement, and which I would say this is the main job of the Bank of Canada. If you want to say what has the Bank of Canada, like what's their main job, one job is basically to bring down inflation. The other important factor is unemployment. So the last unemployment rate in May is up to 6.2%. This is generally, like when you think about it, it's bad news. Nobody wants to be unemployed, but it does make the Bank of Canada consider rate cuts, which is what happened in their last rate announcement. So the last rate announcement was actually June 5th, and the next one will be 4th. Now, if you want to see how much, what rate was the last rate cut, on the next slide here, is they cut rates from 5% to 4.75%. Now, that's what's called the overnight rate, which is what the Bank of Canada uses in its own, let's say, transactions with other banks. It's not the rate that you're getting. An interesting question that I had come in is, if rates are at 4.75%, why isn't my rate 4.75%? Because it's a different rate. That's not what's used in mortgage rates. It's related, but it's not directly related. So the good thing is the rate cut happened, and this directly affects people with prime rates, which means people such as variable rate mortgage holders. So the prime rate right now is 6.95%, which means that variable rates today are anywhere between 5.7 to 6.7%. Now it's still above fixed rates. If you look here, 5-year fixed rates, 4.69 to 5.29%, and then 3-year fixed rate, 4.99. Now, why is there such a big range? It's because it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on what's your mortgage amount, how much down payment are you put in, credit score. There's a lot of factors that come into determining what rate you're getting, and we can get into that for your particular situation if you want to reach out, but this is the general range.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to do a quick little high level here about what happened in May, just so you guys can get a sense of how the market is panning out. So total residential transactions, how much sales we're seeing in the marketplace. So year over year, we are seeing it come down. It is 21%. That is quite large, and that is something that signals that, my goodness, we're seeing a lot less activity in the marketplace. What's going on? Seasonally adjusted, though, it has been pretty flat, and I think a lot of times people were thinking, remember, this is before the rate drop that just happened last week. Just want to be clear on that. So for folks that are wondering, this specific number here are things that happened in May. Okay, so we're talking about a little bit 1 month before. We are seeing sales are coming down. We are seeing less people are competing in homes in the marketplace. But interestingly, what we're seeing, and this is where the opportunity comes in, we're seeing new listings are increasing. So if you compare May of last year versus this year, we did see a 21% increase in new listings that have come to the marketplace. This here is signaling the opportunity. If you look to your right, there's something called sales to new listing ratio. As we're seeing sales come down, we're seeing new listings are starting to pick up more and more. This is where, if you are a buyer, start to think in this aspect of we're seeing more listings come to the market. We're seeing less people are competing with the market. We're going to see less and less bidding wars. We're going to see more and more opportunities where you can come in and actually bid aggressively and be in a buyer market territory. The one thing I want to share with you here is The news makes it put out very, they want to sell the media. This number is the GTA. This number doesn't include all housing categories. You're talking about condos, you're talking about semi-detached, talking about townhouses and even detached homes. It does encompass multiple areas. So I don't want to dive into too much detail here because you might be looking at a house in Mississauga. Who cares about something that's happening in the Durham region or in Toronto? So that's why I don't want to dive into it too much, but specifically it is looking to be more and more buyer market territory. Yes, it is, still expensive to qualify for a home. Yes, there is still this stress test. So if somebody has a question about that, we can talk about that a little bit as well. But it is becoming less and less competitive to go in and purchase these homes. So just some quick little tips here to kind of close things off for home buyers is start by lowering your debts. Start with things you can control. Don't point at income is not high enough. Don't point at property prices are high. That's true. Those are factors and those are things maybe that we need to work on. But focus on things you can control, which is lowering your debts.
And
so you're not,
I would say another thing when it comes to lowering your debts is speak to a mortgage agent if you're thinking of buying a home, because there is a certain strategy of how to maximize your mortgage qualification when it comes to the existing debts you have. You might think it's lowering the highest balance debts, but it isn't. It's more related to your monthly payments, which we can go into more detail. But before you actually start the strategy of lowering your debts, of course, speak to a financial advisor accountant, but also speak to a mortgage agent to understand which has the most leverage and most time savings and for you to be able to buy a home.
Yeah, a question just popped up which I really liked, and I just want to jump into it quickly. Is with the latest interest rate drop, what did we see? Right, it's only been about a week now with the activity, but one thing that's interesting is we saw only a 0.25 drop. And we're probably going to see a very gradual drop towards the end of the year. We're not even probably going to see, a full 1% drop at the end of the year. I don't know. Nobody in this call knows. But if we had to guess, it's probably going to be very gradual. For folks that are wondering, and this was thanks to Hala giving me that economic breakdown, very intelligent breakdown, is you can't really drop rates too fast, too aggressively, because it will weaken our dollar, which will have other economic problems that it will create. So you are likely to see a very gradual drop throughout the year, and it is going to be very dependent on what other nations are also doing. So our neighbor, the US. So these are some things you have to consider as well. And if you are wondering, last week, did it drive more activity to the market? It has been pretty steady. It was not a 0.25 drop and then everybody started calling and let's go see home, let's go do this. So that's just a 1 week snapshot from a personal level, but we will share the data with you, of course, as they come out throughout the rest of the month and early next month. So this is why we want you guys to be informed of the newsletter and as well as attend these kinds of webinars.
Okay. Yeah, another thing is because the rate cuts are directly related to variable rates, which are still higher than fixed rates. Fixed rates right now are what the qualification power is at. And fixed rates, they already started to come down since last year. But recently, with what's happening in the market, it didn't come down. And we're still waiting to see what happens. But like you mentioned, there is no effect that happened or impact on that regard.
Excellent. So some key takeaways here before we dive into your questions. By the way, I'm loving the questions that are coming in. We're going to go through them right now. So lowering your debts, taking advantage of the home buyer programs, right? The RSPs, the FHSAs. And then please, guys, please, I should have maybe even put this earlier, stay away from pre-construction. 95% of the projects out there are not worth it. They will give you huge incentives. The larger the incentives, the crappier and more of a ripoff it is. So a blank statement say, do not go into pre-construction. And if you're wondering, we actually make more money on pre-construction. So me being in sales and commissions, selling you a pre-construction, we can end up netting more money. And I'm telling you, do not go into pre-construction. So I just don't want to hear that anybody hopefully got into it. And then the last thing is working with professionals. Working with professionals. Just talk to your financial advisors early. Talk to the accountants. Talk to the mortgage brokers. And talk to your real estate agents early. It can be up to 2 years early. Don't be afraid. And with that, I'm going to leave you guys off with some important links: Equifax.ca, Credit Karma, TransUnion if you need to. Use our websites. This presentation will be uploaded on YouTube. And we're going to now dive into your questions. Okay, so there's some great questions that came up. Let's dive into it. You have our contact information here if you need it, but forget that for now. Let's dive in. So thank you guys for putting up these questions. Modo, let's get going. So it is it better to just put your money in an FHSA, RSP, or to invest it in there? If investing, what are some low-risk investments that we should consider? So I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. We are both not financial advisors. We're both not going to, don't take whatever we say, for merit and go in and do it. But interestingly, what we do have is Hala on the line, which I'm going to unmute, if you're comfortable with that, Hala, to dive in and talk, because she is a lot more knowledgeable than I am in this. I think I'm going to have to, how do you unmute?
Yeah, I guess open it up for the platform and just let Hala.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So I'm going to open up the microphone for people. So Hala, you should be able to unmute right now.
Hi, Mohammed. How are you? And Modo as well,
Yeah.
and everyone.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the informative session. That was very useful. And of course, it will make someone think about reaching out to professional that can help you make an informative decision. With all the noise and uncertainty in the markets and in the economy, definitely we need someone's guidance on that. So thank you for everything.
Thank you all for attending too. Like, it's a Saturday. Sure, we could be doing a whole lot of other things than being here listening to us boring people talk.
So, are we going to the questions?
The first
Yeah,
question.
I actually thought you raised your hand because you wanted to answer this, because you're literally a financial advisor. So,
no, it's just
so
like
the question is,
here.
yeah, it's the first question that's up there, right? So is it better to put your money in an FHSA or RSP, or to invest it while it's in there? So I think a lot of people have the misconception, if I understand it correctly from the question that's being asked, is when you're putting your money in an RSP, it's just sitting there waiting. I think people don't realize that the RSP and the FHSA can be accounts that are tied with direct investment accounts. Like you can literally buy stocks with it, or ETFs, or bonds, or whatever you're into.
Mm-hmm.
But probably the second part, which works more specific to you, is what are some low risk investments that we should consider? Why not, right? Kind of share a few basic ones.
So actually, the first big step and the biggest saving is coming from the tax deduction when you put that cash inside the FHSA or the RSP, and then another part would come from the investment returns if you would like to invest those amounts, right? So as I mentioned, biggest part would be the tax deduction, because it will put you back some grants in your pocket that you can further invest. I will definitely recommend to have those amounts invested. But what to invest in depends on when do you plan to buy that property. Is it 6 months down the road? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the road? That drives what would be a suitable investment for you towards those goals, or towards those down payment savings. So usually if you have a shorter time horizon, if you are buying it like in a couple of months down the road, 1 year, even 2 years, I would always go with the low risk investments, because that would be a very short time horizon, and we never know when you are planning to make that down payment or withdraw those funds, whether the market will be up or down, or what would be the market condition by that time. So some options of the low risk investments would be definitely GICs, whether it's cashable or non-cashable. And also here you will choose whether you are buying it certainly within the year, go for cashable GIC, or for sure if you would like to buy like in 1 year or 2 years, you can lock it just to get more interest returns. Another option would be a money market fund. It's similar to GICs. The only difference is that the rate is variable, so it fluctuates with the Bank of Canada interest changes, right? But for the GIC, you guarantee the rate for the term that you bought it for. So these are two options for the very low risk investments that you can choose from.
We got to start charging for these sessions. That was a whole breakdown. Good job there. So you see why we unmuted her, right? So Hala, guys, for anyone that is watching, Hala is very, very knowledgeable with personal finance. She's the one that actually explained to me why they can't just drop rates too much, because that will weaken our dollar, and there's other kind of issues that can go there. But anyways, enough about me. Let's talk about your questions here. At which point of closing do you need to withdraw from RSP and FHSA?
Yeah, so I think from the mortgage standpoint, if you're buying a home and you have your funds there, is anytime before closing. But I would say ideally give yourself at least 10 business days, let's say 2 weeks before closing, to be able to, because it takes some time to withdraw the amounts. You have to go to your bank or wherever the institution that's holding your funds. There's a process there. So to have that peace of mind, I would say at least 2 weeks before your closing date, get that money out from those accounts into your personal accounts. And then afterwards, you would transfer those accounts to your lawyer who is representing you in a real estate transaction, who will in turn be sending that amount as part of your down payment to the lawyer of the sellers. So excellent question. As long as the 90-day withholding period for the RSP has been achieved, then 10 business days before, you can pull it out.
Perfect. But by the way, guys, super informal right now. If you want us to continue answering the questions, go for it. If some of these questions are asked by the people that are raising their hand, if they want to unmute, go for it. Everyone should be able to unmute. We don't mind either way.
Awesome.
Presentation
Thank you.
portion is done. It's just now answering questions and just having some dialogue.
Yeah, we have Wangela here. Thanks for joining. She has very detailed and excellent questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'm flooding you with questions here today. So I just wanted to get some quick clarifications. So, you put in an offer, it gets approved, and then I've heard there's about 60 days before closing, correct? So let's just say that I put in an offer. I put all my money into RRSP today. I put in an offer in 1 month, and then there's the closing within 2 months. Does that still work within that 90-day frame? Essentially, can it be on the very end, like right before you move in, that you have to withdraw all that money?
That's an excellent question. So with the RSPs, the 90-day, you can include, if you're not using it for the down payment, but you want to take it out without being taxed on it, you have up to 30 days after closing to take the money out, right? But if you just put it in and that 90-day withholding period before closing hasn't finished, then yes, for that year that you took the money out, it will be added to your income for that year, and it would be taxed accordingly.
And to answer your question even more deeper, is the 60 days in your example does count in the 90 days, yes. So you'll be fine that way. But I gotta tell you this, when from a person that's on the floor, like working and putting in like offers in this marketplace, if you're wondering why people are selling in this, why would you sell a home in a marketplace when you could have waited a little bit more and get potentially more dollars? Remember what we said, there's a cost to waiting to purchase the home. But for the sellers, it's the opposite. There's a gain to waiting. Do I still have you there, or did I kind of lose you guys? I'm going to go back a few just to kind of explain this, okay? Sorry, guys. I hate to do this, but this part here, for a buyers, this is an opportunity. Buying now versus waiting, and then the prices go up. For the seller, there's an opportunity to waiting, the opposite. So if you wait as a buyer, it's a cost, but for a seller, it might be an opportunity to waiting when rates come down, because you can potentially sell it for more money, correct? You're coming in to put an offer in, and you say, I'll buy your property, and I'm going to buy your property in 60 days, or you can even do 90 days, you can even do 120 days for your closing date for your offer. While another buyer comes in and says, hey, I'm going to give you maybe $10,000 less, but I'm going to give you, I'm firm, I'm 30 days, we can close, maybe even sooner. You can see how that offer now looks a lot more attractive, even though the dollar amount is less. People that want to sell today, in some cases, need to sell today. So for you, you don't want to be waiting to put money in from an RSP. Like, you want to put, this is why it's a homework for this week, is if you're thinking about buying the next 2 years, put your RSP today, guys. Like, there's nothing you're losing out on. Even if you have an emergency, you need the money, you can pull it back out. You literally just file some papers and you can pull the money out. I think it's 48 hours for it to come out. But to be conservative, Modo and I like to say 1 week to 2 weeks, right? In case you file something wrong. So the RSP money can also be money that you might need. So don't ever feel like I'm going to need to leave $50,000 on a checking account, because
So,
when you're
does
putting
that
in offers,
answer, Angela?
guys, unmute. Anyone who wants to talk, unmute. Don't worry. The presentation part is done. We just want to help answer your questions. With that said, I hope we answered it. We're going to dive into the next one here. If you have questions, by the way, just raise your hand or unmute. At which point of closing, so we talked about that one. The next one here is, what is the disadvantage of using a TFSA versus the ones that we talked about, FHSA and RSP? They're literally, you can even look at them as the opposite. A TFSA is money that you got taxed on. So for example, you made 100,000, you got taxed, let's say 30%. So now you have 70,000 left. And then you put $10,000 in a TFSA. If that $10,000 you invested in some stocks, let's say you were lucky and you bought some NVIDIA, and the $10,000 doubled, right? It went up to $20,000. That extra increase it gained, the 10,000 increase that it gained, that is going to be taxed now as income. Sorry, because it was already taxed, sorry, TFSA. Because it was already taxed, your money doubled, you can pull it out of that account, nothing's going to happen. You are not going to be taxed on it. So just keep that in mind, guys. The TFSA is money that was already taxed, so it will not be taxed again. RRSP or FHSA, you can still go buy stocks with it. And if you choose to go buy stocks with those accounts, if that stock, like we just in that example, you made $100,000 and you put $10,000 in an RSP or FHSA, you made $100,000, you put $10,000 in an FHSA or RSP, now you're only going to be taxed at the balance, the $90,000. So instead of getting taxed at $30,000, you're getting taxed at $27,000. So you save $3,000 instantly in taxes, just by putting the money in a different account. That's all you're doing, just move money around. But let's say that $10,000 you went and you bought some stocks with it, and it doubled, let's just say. When you come to pull money out of that account, it's going to be treated as income. So this is why people love the idea of a TFSA account, right? Tax-free savings account. It sounds amazing, but you don't get the perk of the tax deductions that you get early on from lowering your income, right? What an RSP does, remember, is you get an incentive by filing a lower income amount. That is the benefit of the RSP and the FHSA. Now you can only take money out of your RSP and FHSA up to $60,000 for RSP, up to $8,000 per year for FHSA, without any income tax penalty if you're using it for a home purchase or you're using it for a lifelong learning. So that's where the benefit is. You still get the tax benefit of income, and you can use the money without being hit with any income tax. TFSA is completely different. You've already been taxed. Your income's already been hit with taxes. So that's where the discrepancy is. So I hope that kind of clears up the differences there for people. Can we also talk about how tax works if you buy, then end up choosing to rent it out down the line? Great question. I would strongly advise whoever asked that question, talk to their accountant, because that's a very detailed situation. But typically speaking, how it works is, let's say you bought a home today and you rent it out right away, you should be claiming it as an investment property, which means as this property is rented out for, let's say, year 1, 2, and 3, when that property gets sold, let's say in year 3, it will get hit with something called capital gains tax. How much the property increases in value over those years, that's how much tax you'll be hit. But let's take a dive in this specific scenario. Let's say you bought a property. Let's say you bought it for $500,000, but you lived in it for 5 years. Then in year 5, you start renting it out. You moved out of the country or something happened, whatever, you rent it out. Okay? And you're renting out to like outside of family members, and like it's on the books, as they say, all right? What's happening here? The individual that does, when you rent it out at year 5, they look at how much the property value is at year 5. So if it's 500,000 when you bought it, in year 5 it's, let's say, 700,000. Let's just say, from year 5 onwards, whatever more it gains, that will be hit on capital gains. I still strongly advise you, talk to your accountant on this, because it is very specific. If you have 2 properties already, and that one you were claiming as your primary resident, then this one from day 1 it will start, right? So you want to make sure it's what property you're claiming as primary residence that gets exempt. You don't pay any tax capital gains on that. But if it's a property that you were investing and you're claiming as an investment property, that you have to pay capital gains on. There's still more questions. You guys have asked amazing questions. That's why we're going to spend some time and go through them all. How can we reduce the fixed mortgage term instead of 5 or 3 year to 1 or 2 year term?
I would say it depends. Like, so if this is someone that hasn't chosen their term yet, they're still buying a home, then you would just have the option to choose either or. Now, 70% of buyers these days, they choose, or even existing borrowers, they choose the short-term fixed, which is usually the 3 years, because first of all, rates are currently high and they're coming down. So in the next 2 to 3 years, when they renew, they would renew at a lower rate, as opposed to going for a 5-year fixed and then waiting all that time and missing out on any opportunities. But why do people not go with 1 or 2 year instead? I think that was the question, maybe, is usually 1 or 2 year terms are higher rates than the 3 year term, even higher, which sometimes doesn't justify going with that higher of a rate, even though it's a shorter term. 3 years are where we're finding the sweet spot, where you have some advantages in savings. There's cashback offers attached to it as well. So this is why we see most people going towards the 3 years. And another thing is, the higher rate doesn't only affect your interest cost, but it also affects your qualification. So if you're qualified for, let's say, 500,000 with the 3 year term, you go to a higher rate 1 year or 2 year term, now you're only qualified for like 475,000, or maybe even 450. So that's something that needs to be discussed for your specific situation to see which one makes more sense for yourself. I hope that answers the question.
By the way, Hala, if you're comfortable, you can post your contact information. A few people have asked for it already. Feel free to put it in the chat. And if you want us to, we can also add it in the mailing follow-up afterwards. We don't mind sharing it with people. What is the maximum we could deposit in the first home buyer? Does Equifax have a free account? So to answer the second part, yes, Equifax has a free account. And if you want to use Equifax but like byproducts, you could use something like Borrow Well as well. What is the maximum amount we could deposit in the first home buyer? So
I think the FHSA, maybe that's what they mean.
Yeah. So FHSA is $8,000 per year. So if you open it today, you get $8,000 this year and $8,000 for every subsequent year, up to $40,000 in year 5. And RSP is a little bit tricky. I don't want to say 60,000 for RSP, guys, because if you are relatively new in working in Canada, filing taxes in Canada, it's typically, I think the number is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Hal, on this, is it's like 8% or so of your income goes towards your RSP contribution room. So if you make, like, let's say 100K, then $8,000 per year you can put towards your contribution room. The easiest way to tell is when you log into your CRA website, type literally on Google CRA space login. You scroll down and you just sign into your your taxes, and then you can see 2 things: your TFSA contribution room and your RSP contribution room. And those are your best and easiest ways. Oh, sorry, it's 18% of your income. There you go. See, this is why we have her. What the hell do I know? And you can see what your contribution room is. So you don't want to go in and just put 60,000 right away and then find out that you're over contributing. There's a penalty you pay there. So you just want to make sure you're within it. But most people, if you've been working for about 5 or 6 years, you probably have already capped the 60,000. Okay.
I just want to
Um,
mention something. It's worth mentioning it. RSP's deductions are very attractive. So please, before making any contributions, make sure that you have the contribution room available. Otherwise, if you over contributed, you will be paying 1% penalty per month. And we don't want that to happen. So please, it's very important to know the contribution room before making any contributions.
Excellent
yeah,
point.
excellent point there. Does your group have a cap on the price of property to buy? No, we've worked in the 2 million plus. We've worked with 400,000. We're very wide. We have to be, right? We have to accommodate all different types of buyers, depending on the situation. We've had people that are investors that buy multiple properties. We've had people that are first-time buyers that are trying to figure out how to even get into the market with something as little as, in just the last year or two. Even like this past year was a townhouse, 3-bedroom townhouse for like 650. So it really does range, right? It's in the type of purchases you're making. Location-wise, I would say is where we're more capped. I do target more of the GTA, but I do have partners in different provinces as well. So if you are looking to buy even in, let's say, big hotspot these days you're hearing is Alberta or Calgary, we do have agents that we work with in that market, Ottawa, St. Catharines, Niagara region. And my brokerage specifically does work in the US. So if you are somebody that's considering the US as an option, we do have some great agents that we can help connect you with. So you can even start considering those options. But if you are looking to stay within the GTA market, we'll work with us directly, and we can help you get through your achieve your real estate goals there. So I hope that answered the question. Can you confirm the following? If you put dollar amount in RSP, then withdraw it before 90-day period, you just lose the tax deduction. Exactly. So whatever you would have paid in tax anyways, it would be the same thing. Nothing bad happens. I would strongly urge put that money in as early as possible. And make sure you put money into your FHSA first. So $8,000 first there, and then the balance in an RSP. The FHSA is a better account, but it just has less amount that you can put. On the chat, okay, would you recommend buying a home or buying land and a building? So very good question. I'll talk about from a real estate stance, and then I'll let Modo talk about it from a qualifying stance. So for me, I always tell folks is try to focus on your specific needs. So if you are renting currently, but you feel like the rental is not meeting your needs, or if your rental is amazing, it's meeting your needs, but you want to be in the market so you can start building some equity and grow your net worth, then getting the home can make sense. So I would say buying a home, to answer that question specifically, buying a home makes more sense than, let's say, buying land or a building. Here's where a building might work, but that is now looking at just investments altogether. And you would actually sit down, not just with myself, but you'd actually sit down with someone like Hala and look at where other options, because now it's just a numbers game. You don't care about the size of the room, the neighborhood, the school ratings. You don't care about any of that stuff. You literally just care about numbers. I want to buy this building, what the ROI looks like, net income from the building, operating expenses. Like, you're looking at it from a business stance, which means you should have 2 conversations, at least, probably 3, because you want to see if you qualify for a mortgage. But you also want to talk to someone like Hala and see what she will advise you from a financial planner perspective, to see does it make sense for you, if the numbers, the ROIs, all that stuff makes sense, and then we'll give you a sense of, okay, this building is better than this specific building. So for the person that asked that question, probably start off with a home, securing it for your family, a bit more stable, more steady. If you really want to do some investing, maybe get a duplex or a home that has a basement that you can rent, or a secondary unit on the back that can be rented. Get some income, cash flow going, and then start considering more lucrative things like buying land. Modo can probably explain that buying land, you can't just do it with 5% down payment. But yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I would say, like, the simple answer would be buying a home is easier in terms of qualifying and all of that. If you compare that to buying land and then building on top of the land, that is definitely an option that you can do if the numbers make sense. Mortgage-wise, it's just buying the land and getting the financing for the land itself, and then getting the financing for building the land. It's usually not with your typical banks. It's usually with lenders that have higher rates in the beginning. So what investors usually do is they get private financing for the land, private financing for the construction itself, and then when it's all ready and done, they would do what's called a refinance and switch that loan from the private high interest loan to the typical A lending lower rates. So it might take a year or two or a couple of months before you're able to get to that final low cost A lender.
Yeah. First of all, great patience. A lot of people are still watching.
Yeah.
Hala, do you have a contact info? How
I
can we
think
work
she
with
just
you?
shared it. Yeah, so for anyone who wants, Hala's information is there. Or feel free to reach out to us as well afterwards. We can provide that info.
Yeah, I just put it here for people so it's a little bit easier. Forget the 80% of income part. Okay. And yeah, the last question that we got here so far is, does the potential of rent of basement helpful in getting a higher mortgage? Excellent question. Modo, you want to take that over?
Yeah, excellent question. The short answer is yes, definitely. It will help you get a higher mortgage because whatever rent you're getting from that basement is added on top of your own household income. So that will increase your mortgage qualification. There are some certain calculations to it. And the other thing is for the basement to be considered, like to be able to consider the rent coming from the basement, I would say make sure that it's a separate entrance basement. It has its own washroom, its own kitchen. So at least like it's a self-contained unit, then you should be able to use it. But let's say it doesn't have a separate entrance, there might not be a kitchen there, or there might not be a washroom there, then it becomes more difficult to be able to use that income.
All right. Thank you, guys. I think we've gone through the questions. We want to thank everybody. Who is the best person to talk to regarding rental laws? Perfect. So we're going to leave the presentation at that for now. Give me 1 second. We're going to answer that question, but privately. I can stop the recording.